The cow says...
Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector and this is The Broken Meeple, a show where I devote my time to ranting and raving about board games, but usually more the ranting part. We've got an interesting one here because if people know my channel, they know that my history when it comes to Great Western Trail is a little bit odd, to say the least. I hated, with a passion, the first edition of Great Western Trail. Like when it originally came out, played it, didn't like it, thought it was unbalanced, just tried it several times, tried to see if I was missing something, and just couldn't get into it. Then lots of time passed and I still didn't like it on subsequent tries. Then the second edition came out and it was like, okay, well, I don't know if it's really going to solve that much for me. Then my friends introduced me to New Zealand, which for some reason I latched onto, thought this is really good, this clears up a lot of the problems I had with the original one, and now it's on my shelf with an insert and everything. Like that's how much it actually went for me. But now we've got a spin-off here, Mr. El Paso. This is meant to be an introduction to Great Western Trail because it's not the lightest game ever. There's quite a lot going on. There's a fair amount of rules. And so this is meant to be kind of like your ticket into Great Western Trail. It's meant to be a lot shorter of a playtime, easier rules, but still have fundamentally the same kind of mechanics that you are doing in Great Western Trail. Is it any good? Can it stand on its own? Does it replace the original? Questions that need answering. El Paso still borrows pretty much the same mechanics with a couple of tweaks from the original brethren. You've got a rondel system where your cowboy will move around this map until it eventually gets back to El Paso. I think in one it was Washington, the other one it was Kansas, whatever. And the idea is that you are trying to sell cattle. So your cattle come in various sort of different values and types via these cards. And you're essentially playing a sort of pseudo deck building system where by the time you get back round to El Paso, you're trying to have as many different types of cattle in your hand as possible, and during the round you will discard and draw cards and maybe get rid of some for money and, you know, exchange for others. You know, you'll do various things to try and build up a good hand by the time you make your way back to El Paso. The timer for the game is effectively a bunch of sort of 0 VP cows that you take one every time you go back to El Paso. So basically, as soon as somebody has done it enough, as soon as it's happened enough times, the game end will trigger. But you've got effectively 3 different ways that you can approach this game. You've got the cowboys, you know, they come in 3 different worker guises basically. Cowboys, builders, and engineers. The cowboys enable you to get better cattle so that you can move around the board a little bit quicker, but mainly they get you the better value of the cows, which is going to help you to sell at higher values, which means you can get more victory points. You've then got the builders, which allow you to build various buildings on the map to increase the number of spaces that there are. There's going to be some neutral ones out when the game starts, you know, based on random allocation, but you've also got several others in different rankings that you can build. You can have 2 buildings in the game and you can upgrade them as the game goes on, and these give you personally some other cool actions that you might be able to do. And then you've got the engineer, which is based on a train system, but there's no actual train track. You've effectively got 4 of these train cards laid out at the start, of which they're double-sided. They've got little bonuses and actions on, and if you've got enough engineers, you can trigger some of those bonuses. Your turn is literally to move a certain number of spaces around the board, trigger the location that you're on, and what you can do in order to boost some of the actions is to use the workers. So in the previous game you had workers and they were just a permanent buff. Well, this time you've now got them represented by cards. They go in your deck and you draw them out and they go in front of you. The idea is that some of the actions, like grabbing cows for example, you know, require you to discard a certain amount of cowboys in order to get the better cattle. When you discard them, they just go in your discard pile and you'll draw them out again later. Alternatively, you can discard one at any point to get the bonus at the top of the card. The rest of the game is mostly kind of rinse repeat in that fashion, although you can get little objective tiles that give you bonuses if you can get the requirements by the end of the game, and there's other little bonus tiles you can grab as well. But for the most part, that's kind of the gist of the game. You can tell it's already similar to its older brother, but it's definitely simplified. People are still doing the familiar thing of moving the cowboy around, landing on spaces, and, you know, getting back to El Paso and selling stuff. But you don't have hazard tiles, you don't have taxing, none of the buildings tax each other for income, there's no bandits that you can go to or anything like that, and there's no train track that goes around the board that, you know, enables you to get less money when you sell stuff. In fact, you don't even get money for your cattle when you sell, you just get a flat value of 5. You know, the whole getting different types of cattle is purely from a points perspective, and the game just carries on until someone makes that end game trigger, at which point, next person to El Paso, 1 turn each, game ends. Okay, first we gotta talk about components here. I mean, this game is relatively cheap. You can buy it for about £25 online, which for most games these days is actually quite cheap. But they've definitely had to keep this at a budget in more ways than one on the components front. I mean, these are pretty shoddy components, even for £25. I mean, firstly, like the good components is giant wooden meeples, so there's 4 of those, and adequate thickness for the cardboard buildings. There you go, there's your good components. The rest of it though, oh my word. I mean, you have got really flimsy boards for your little player boards. You've got, you know, cardboard tuck boxes for the various components, which are basically all cardboard. And the problem with these sort of tuck boxes is that they're quite tight. I mean, some of these components will barely fit in them. And you're obviously going to have to stick your finger in there in order to get the lid off. That's going to increase wear and tear. The cards are, you know, pretty easily bendable. So if you've got those sort of players who can't treat cards with respect, then you're going to have troubles. Not to mention trying to shuffle a deck of tiny cards is kind of annoying. You've got then the cloth playmat, and I do mean cloth. This isn't neoprene, this is cloth. So you got to deal with creases. You've also got to deal with the fact that the colours are so faded on this thing that if you play this in a bright light, you actually might not be able to see half of this playmat. Certainly I can't even make out the scenery in the background, so honestly this might as well just be a beige playmat for all it matters with the colour in the background, because I can't see anything. It's just kind of ridiculous. But man, do they go the whole hog with some of these though. I mean, you're trying to keep this price point down. Okay, so you've got, alright fine, mid cardboard, tiny bit of wood, some flimsy cards, you know, what else can you possibly cheapen on? Yeah, you've got discs and you've got cubes, right? At least disc and cube markers. You know the game normally has little wooden discs and maybe the odd cube here and there? These are thin cardboard. You get a thin cardboard cube marker and thin little disc-like markers. The game is so cheap it couldn't even afford to give you a total amount of 8 cubes. Cubes are not something that's hard to get hold of. For instance, this is my bag of spare cubes that I have acquired from a bunch of games that I've upgraded or just found a bunch of cubes cheap online and just got them as spares. I mean, cubes are not expensive and you can't even give me wooden discs and cubes. What about the gameplay aspects? Well, first thing that I do quite like is the way that these worker cards happen. So you don't have the worker tiles that you buy them and then they're permanently in your stash. You now have the cards. So you buy the card, it goes in front of you and you stack them up. You can discard them for the bonus at the top. Quite cool, another choice that you have to make. Or you can get wilds, although to be honest, you don't really feel like buying wilds most of the time because it's extra money on top of the already high price point to get these things. But these cards basically allow you to do the different things and they're worth VP. But once you do an action, you then discard them. They go in your discard pile and then you got to wait for them to come back out before you can do the actions again. That's quite cool, but it does have the knock-on effect of increasing the luck factor a bit, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in a sec. But the idea that once you've used them, you've then got to wait for them to come back out of your deck. Well, they might all come out at once, they might not come back out for ages. Are you going to get to your spot before they come out? Well, that's down to the gods of fate, basically. So there's a bit of a pro and con to them, but it's a neat little idea and another way of sort of just kind of varying up the game, really. But yeah, it does have that sort of knock-on effect. Other than that, though, a lot of the stuff in this game just feels a little uninspired. You know, the depth from the bigger brother games is gone. You know, any of that depth doesn't exist here. You've got basically the original Great Western Trail, but then distilled down even further. And it has several problematic issues with that. Firstly, the actions that you're doing in this game just don't feel that interesting. I mean, take the buildings themselves. I mean, they are mostly just auxiliary actions, maybe get a token, maybe a card, and that's it. But they don't really do anything that interesting. And that's assuming you've built some of the higher value ones anyway. Although, you know, well, we'll talk about one building a little bit later. But then you've got the cowboy bits. Well, that's the same as before. You buy other cows and you sell them at El Paso. But then, blimey, I don't know what, did somebody literally just remember that they had a third class they had to deal with for the engineer? The engineer class is boring. Because basically you just lay out this locomotive, you've got 3 trains, and then based on the number of engineers and money you're willing to pay, you discard and get the bonuses on there. That's all the train is. It's not a strategy in the game, though. You can't win the game with this tactic. So in terms of path to victory, this game really only has one. The cowboys. You can sort of win maybe if you go down full buildings route, but you can only have 2 buildings. The buildings aren't that great anyway. There's no taxing of other players, so you can't get money that way. And it just feels like a fairly mundane thing, because you've just basically got to go round, do a build, go around, do a build, go around, do a build. And it's a very slow sort of winded process, whereas you can actually get other ways of getting cows. So the game really does focus you on getting cows. And that is definitely the best way to play it. It is the one strategy it aims you for. So any kind of path to victory variety that the other games had, particularly New Zealand, where you've got at least a good 5 or 6 different paths to victory you can follow in that one, this one barely has 1.5. But then you've also got the problem that, as I said, these workers have to come out at the right time, otherwise you won't be able to do the action by the time you come back round the board to get it. You know, at least when they're permanently in front of you, you know you have it for when you need it, but now you've got to rely on the deck building system to churn them out on top of the cow. So you've got to wait for them to churn out those cards as well as the cow cards. So the luck factor and the swinginess has gone up quite a few notches here. But then maybe the game's relatively short, you know, that's not a problem. It's not that short, guys. I mean, the box says 60 to 90 minutes, and you're going to be hard-pressed to do it anywhere close to 60. You're definitely looking more at a 90-minute front here, particularly with more players. I've played this solo, and even then you are pushing it to get it to 60 minutes, unless you're going at hyperspeed. So, you know, 60 is the absolute minimum you're going to play it, and that's after setting it up. So you've got to factor in another, you know, bit of time after that. But yeah, you're talking 79 to 90 minutes to play this game. And the big box game, yeah, granted, it takes about 3 hours to play that one. It takes forever to play the, you know, big ones. But if you're going to make me an introduction to the game, you need to make one really quick. Like snappy, fast, snappy turns, very quick. And this one just doesn't feel like that at all. It just feels like you're playing the big game just for not as long as the big game. And then you've got the solo mode. You can play this against a Sioux Autumna deck, and in terms of interaction in this game, there isn't a lot of interaction at all, really, because you don't tax other players. There's nothing for moving past you, and there's only so many spaces on the board, and a lot of the times there's multiple routes that you can go, so you don't really slow people down to a great extent. But yeah, nothing really happens in terms of multiplayer interaction. You are pretty much playing your own game while someone else is playing their own game, and yeah, you just don't really get in each other's faces that much, so you might as well play it solo, frankly. And the solo mode is, you know, at least reasonably easy to pilot. I mean, you basically just flip a card off the deck, tells you how far to move their piece, they do an action, they're clearly explained in there, and, you know, a few FAQ moments may arise, but for the most part, it's generally quite easy to pilot. Though it still takes a fair bit of time to do everything by yourself, hence, like I said, the 60 minutes is kind of pushing it for a time frame. But the problem with this is that this is even more swingy than the main game, because this game basically relies on you creating a supply deck. So a supply deck for the Autumna, right? And at times it's going to ask you to draw cards from it. If it's cattle, they'll basically go in a stack of cattle, and it's just basically all their points at the end of the game. But they also start off with some workers, and they have a lot more workers in their supply deck. Now, if they don't draw their workers out early, then a lot of the times they do the building action and, you know, the cowboy action, they're not going to be able to get that much, and it slows their tempo down. But if you're unfortunate to draw a bunch of their workers early out of the supply deck, their actions skyrocket in terms of power, and you will not be able to catch them up. I mean, the first time I played this, and this was on the easiest difficulty, right? There was apparently 4 levels of difficulty in this. I played on the easiest difficulty, and I know how to play the big games like New Zealand and that, you know, like the back of my hand, and I only won on a tiebreaker on the easiest difficulty. Playing it again either resulted in very tight, you know, wins/losses, or getting whitewashed by the Autumna, because it depended entirely on what came out of the supply deck. If they drew their workers out late, generally I would be able to win, but even then only just, and although a lot easier if I focus on cowboys. But then if they draw their workers out early, it will cream you. You will not be able to catch up with the sheer rate it gets victory points, because it cheats. It cheats its way to it. It'll be like, right, it moves 3 spaces, and now it'll build. Well, it's got a building, it can happily just take 2 of these buildings, and we'll just upgrade to this. Normally, you'd have to wait for your deck to churn out 5 of these builders, and also have a bunch of money available to do this, right? It can just go, I'm there, done. Yep. All right, do you get rid of your workers so that it's harder for you to do the next round? Nope. What? Nope, it doesn't get rid of its workers. So if it's got 2 of its wilds out and, you know, a bunch of the other workers, it permanently has those out. You've got to rely on the deck to churn yours out. The AI doesn't. So the AI is literally cheating its way to a decent amount of VP. So all in all, what are you left with at El Paso? A fairly mediocre experience, really. It's definitely got the flavor of the Big Brother. I mean, the theme is whatever. I mean, it doesn't really... I mean, there's less theme in this than the Bigger Brothers, to be honest. And it's definitely shorter. But it's not a short game. It's still 90 minutes. You know, it's shorter, yes, by comparison, but it's still not a short game. Is it a suitable introduction for players to want to get into Great Western Trail? Yes. You know, if you really want to just give them an introduction to what Great Western Trail is like and then migrate them to that, then fine. But it's still quite a jump from this one to those. And if they're willing to play something as big and involved as Great Western Trail, you might as well just jump them straight into Great Western Trail, frankly. It'll be more fun. But there's a lot of things in here that just, you know, that just feel like uninspired. You know, the components are really chintzy, really cheap. I mean, cloth mats and, you know, cardboard tokens to represent a cube. Seriously, I mean, this is like pretty chintzy, especially even for £25 when I've just shown you a clear example where it can be done better for cheaper. But then also the actions on the buildings, they don't feel that good. And there's even one building that's, you know, even though this game has come out, there's 2 errata already that they missed out. Apparently, you can only trash 5 cattle out of your deck, total in the game. That is a rule that's not in the rule book. And there's also one building here, 2A or whatever it's called, which basically should have had a dividing line, not a separate action line. So it was basically meant to be an or action, not an and action. And this is a misprint on the tile. So you either have to not play with this side, because if you do, it will be ridiculously overpowered, or you've got to remember that, or just use the B side. But, you know, you chinsed out on the components, and you've also missed out 2 very key rules in your rulebook. I mean, come on, guys, you know, a little bit of quality control. But, you know, even when you get all that done, the engineer actions don't feel interesting. The building actions aren't that great, at least not compared to the bigger games. So really, this game is just basically telling you, go cowboys, get cows, go to El Paso, sell, wait for the game to end. It just doesn't feel that fun, really. And it's not bad, it's still okay, but if you tell me, all right, Luke, we're going to play a bit of Great Western Trail. Do you want to play one of the bigger ones, or do you want to play the small one? I'm going to say, well, shall we wait until we've got time to play one of the bigger ones, especially New Zealand? Because I'd much rather play that one than this any day. You know, this one won't give me enough of the cool stuff that you get in the bigger games. I want that depth from those games, not this kind of weird version. And some of these games where they come up with small versions of bigger games do work well. I have seen some good examples, but this one I don't feel is that good an example. You know, you might get some people that will enjoy it, but nobody's going to come out and say that this replaces the bigger games. And if you're that into the bigger games, why do you want a smaller spin-off anyway? You'd rather just play the bigger games. Or I don't even know really what the target market for this is. It's an okay game. It's in the middle, but that's about it. I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. It is basically right in the middle. It's an average game. It's got some stuff I like, but it's very lucky, very swingy, very chintzy, not short enough to be like a quick snappy game, and you know, with uninspired action, stuff that doesn't really give you turns where you feel, oh yeah, that was an awesome turn, and a solo mode that is very dependent entirely on a swingy deck mechanic. You know, it's just got a lot of things that don't quite work for me in it. But it's by no means a bad game. It's just mediocre. I think this one's going to get forgotten pretty quickly. So that's it from me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Check out the rest of my content. I've done plenty of reviews lately, and let me know your thoughts below as to whether you think this is a great game or whether you think this was a waste of time. Did they really need it? How would you have changed things? Do you think the components aren't terrible? You know, by all means, just get your thoughts down below, but of course, keep it civil, keep it on point, no attacking. This is a community forum. So until next time, regardless of whether you prefer to sell your cows at El Paso, Kansas, or Wellington, it's still only a game, so bye for now.